Well, I think we will get started for the evening. Welcome to this February meeting of the League of Women Voters. As advertised, this evening we're going to devote our time to public transportation here in Champaign-Urbana. With us tonight we have two gentlemen who are very much involved in this field. To my left is Steve Carter. Interesting, before I get into his bio and his background, as I was working through their respective biographies, I realized that both of these gentlemen came to us from Indiana. So we're happy to have you.
Is the mic on?
The mic is a recording mic, it's not an amplifying mic, so they're going to have to talk louder than Barb.
That's fine.
Or Barb's going to have to speak louder. Okay. Steve Carter received his bachelor's degree from Indiana State University and an MS in political science, municipal administration from the University of Iowa. He started his career as an intern and a management assistant in Phoenix, Arizona.
Sounds pretty good right now, actually.
Yeah. And then became assistant city manager in Sioux City, Iowa. From there, he moved to chief administrator in Moline, and then from Moline came down to Champaign-Urbana. Until his recent retirement, Steve was the city manager in Champaign, and I think many of us just continue to pigeonhole you in that position. You've been retired for 2 years?
Year and a half, almost 2 years.
Okay.
Almost 2 years.
Steve is a range rider, right? Which is a senior advisor to the Illinois City and County Management Association.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, someone may want to ask what that means or what he does in that capacity. He chaired the Chancellor's Advisory Task Force on the airport, and he's also been involved with the Muhammad Aquifer Protection Association. In 1998, Steve was elected to the National Academy of Public Administrators. On my right is Karl Gnadt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Karl received...
Here.
Could I interrupt long enough to say that Steve had a very important hand in the construction of the building in which we are meeting?
I thought he might, yeah.
Which I had the pleasure of having something to do with.
Yeah.
Karl got his BS from Indiana University of Public and Environmental Affairs in 1990. His first position was as the director of the Danville Mass Transit and remained there until 1995. And then he became the director of market development at CUMTD. Last July, he became its managing director and CEO. So we're going to ask Steve, I think, to start off first by sharing with us some of the work that's been done by the airport study. And then we'll turn to Karl to talk about the new developments going on at MTD. And then we'll open it up for questions from the audience and give them a chance maybe to even bounce ideas or share insights with each other.
So good. Thanks a lot. Nice to be here. It's nice to be with people who care about the community and spend time trying to make it better. The task force was charged by the Chancellor to work for a year and come up with a strategic plan for the airport. So we spent a year doing that, and so I will hit the high points, and I handed out the executive summary, so you have that, and I think electronically you can get the full copy if you'd like the full copy of that. So I'll hit the main points and then answer any questions that you may have beyond that. I think it's important to understand that the Chancellor created the task force really with some instigation from the community, the business community in particular. Met with her and President Easter from time to time and really encouraged them to undertake a study of the airport to see how we could improve it. So this was really a community initiative. The Chancellor was responding to that, and I think she made it very clear from the beginning that she thought the airport was very important to the university as well. But it's the community task force. It had university folks on it. We had about 20 people that were on the task force, many from the private sector, and we had the governmental entities represented. So Champaign-Urbana, the county, Savoy were all represented. Of course, the university was as well. The Convention and Visitors Bureau had a representative on it. So it was really a well-rounded task force. Some Parkland College, some with ties to the air service industry. John Frasca was on the task force, for example. So a lot of folks who were interested. When we set this up, we knew the importance of having consultant services as well, because none of us were really experts in all of this, and so we wanted to make sure that we're working off of some real understanding, people who really had a good understanding of what was going on in the air industry right now. And our job was really to, well, how does that fit into our airport and our community? So the university was expressed a willingness to procure some consultant services as well, and in that regard, they went to the MTD and asked for some help to expedite that process. And so the MTD actually was a financial partner and was the contract agency for the consulting services that we hired. And so we appreciate the support that MTD gave us all the way through the process. The task force met monthly, pretty much. And after the first couple of months, we just brought in local experts that we had some knowledge about and some people from out of town. And then we had the consultants' task divided up so that almost every month they produced another report, which the task force reviewed, asked questions, gave direction on, and then that culminated ultimately then in a strategic plan at the end of the year. Some of the pieces that were particularly interesting was a market study. They called it a true market study. And the consultants have access to information on where every ticket, airline ticket in our market area, where it's sold, where they're leaving from, and where they're going to. So we really had a very good database to work off of. And what that showed was that only about a third of the people in our market area use Willard Airport. And as you would expect, as you get closer to Champaign-Urbana, the percentages rise. And so Champaign-Urbana, a majority of folks who fly out of here fly out of Willard. As you get farther away, then people look at other airports at a greater percentage. So in a way, that's the bad news, good news, and the myth that, well, everybody's flying out of Bloomington, the Central Illinois Regional Airport, because the free parking is just not true. Less than 10% of people are flying out of Bloomington-Normal. That's changed quite a bit over the last few years as they've really lost some air service over there. They lost their low-cost carrier, which allowed airlines over there to raise fees, and so often our fees are less than theirs at the present time. The favorite airport is Indianapolis. About 37% of the people flying from our market area fly out of Indianapolis. About 25% fly out of either O'Hare or Midway. If you combine those two, it amounts just to less than 25%. So that's the bad news. I guess the good news is About our flights are over 80% full. If you take a look at all of the flights out of Champaign-Urbana and average it, they're full just over 80%. And so the good news is that, if we don't have to capture 100% of the market to improve our air service, most likely, this is what the consultants are telling us. Once we hit 90% as an average, why the airlines will be motivated to provide additional flights. And so, we could just increase the share of folks in our area who use Willard maybe to 50%, why, we might be able to justify more easily to the airlines additional flights. So that's you can see how the market study helped us think about, well, what's our strategy and how do we need to move forward. The air service part was real interesting too, because, and the point the consultants make is, well, when some of us were young, we had maybe 30 different airlines flying in the United States. Right now we have 4 major airlines that control over 90% of the flights in the United States. And there are 2 of those airlines that really don't serve regional markets like Champaign-Urbana. Really only United and American have a lot of regional markets, and they've gotten to the point where they tend not to go into markets where the other one is already serving. What's the benefit for them to do that? So as a result, with 4 airlines and the way the air industry is operating, there's not a lot of competition right now. And so you're really kind of at the mercy of what the airlines want to do. And it's a very volatile business, and if they decide that they want to move this plane from Champaign to Bangor, Maine, why, they can do that without a lot of investment. And so the challenge is really a big challenge for any regional airport to draw additional flights, because you're in competition with every airport in the world virtually, because they can choose the one that brings them the most money. It's not because they have a sentimental attachment to Champaign-Urbana. It's what's going to bring the most money to American Airlines. So that was interesting to think about that, and that really focuses on, as we look for additional air service, where do we look for that? What's the likelihood of finding more flights in Champaign? They also looked at the operations and the budget, and their conclusion there was that our airports really operated pretty efficiently. They've reduced some staff in recent years in particular, so they're staffed pretty thin. They've never really had an airport manager in the sense of an airport manager in any other significant airport. They've had an airport manager, but it's been mainly an operations manager. They've never had anybody that's out there meeting with airlines, trying to draw in additional air service, who's marketing in the community. If you go to any of the other airports in Illinois, you're going to find an airport manager that's spending a lot of time in the community. He's calling on airlines on a regular basis to try to encourage flights to their community. And our airport never really has had that. There's really no motivation for the university to do that. It's part of an academic unit a lot of the time. And what they do is very good, but it's very limited. The other thing that the airport never really has done is really look for developing the airport. Other airports generate quite a bit of income through economic development, leases and rents on the airport property. Universities really never had a motivation to do that. So as a result, the state of Illinois subsidized this about $400,000 a year. And the consultants told us that what you see in Illinois is a little bit unusual because many airports around the country, most of the airports around the country, are not publicly subsidized. Well, ours is, because there's never really been the motivation and the ability to generate income from airport property that will help subsidize the operations. We also had a technical committee that we created really to look at the governance side, and the Sixel, which is the consulting firm that was hired, did a report earlier for the Economic Development Corporation looking at governance, and so they'd done a lot of the legwork on this. We thought as we looked at governance options, nobody knew that better than the folks in Champaign-Urbana who used to working within the framework of the laws of the state of Illinois. So we had basically staff people, attorneys from the university, Champaign, MTD was involved. All the governmental entities were made up this task force, really looking at, what's the best way for this to move forward. If the community, in fact, ought to have role in governing the airport moving forward. It's a community asset. What's the best way to do that? And so we looked at different options. And there are a lot, like Illinois, probably other states, but there are a lot of statutory options, but none of them really great or really fit our situation here that well. So the report that we produced then had 14 recommendations. They're listed in the report there. And then at the back end, there was a recommendation by the technical committee for governance. The task force reviewed all of those, tweaked it a little bit in November, finalized it in December, and submitted it to the chancellor. We can talk about some of those here real quickly in a minute. We met with the chancellor on January 27th. We're anxious to see what the chancellor thought. It's really kind of up to her. Okay, here's your report. We're out of business at the end of December, and we're interested in what the university how they might want to proceed. And the chancellor, in her own charming way, said, you guys have done really good work. I really like the strategic plan, but rather than create a new advisory board or anything, why don't you just stay involved in this and help us implement it? And we really need to develop an implementation plan, and surely you'd like to stick around and be part of that. And she turns to me and says, and Steve Carter's agreed to chair this again. And people afterwards said, did you know that was coming? And I said, no. But we had people on the task force who cared about Willard Airport and its importance to the local economy, and spent a year studying it. And so is there an interest in trying to help move this forward? Sure there is. And so I think all but just a couple people, probably for time reasons, have agreed to take some more time and try to implement some of these recommendations that we made. Let me just hit a couple of those real quickly, and if I start running over, just poke me in the ribs or something. Okay. The most important recommendation, according to the task force and the consultants, and I should mention, in addition to SIXL, which is primarily an air service, consulting service, they really help communities all across the United States generate more air service for their communities. Everybody wants to do it. He brought on two other people. One was a fellow by the name of Greg Principato, who had just retired from the North American Airport Association. So he was they had a professional association with all the major airports in North America, and he was the executive director of that group. Spent time on Capitol Hill, state of Virginia, all in transportation issues, a lot of it airport related. And then they brought in another fellow who had just retired as the airport manager for the airport in Savannah. So he had years and years and years of practical experience of running an airport. So the top priority was really the management issue, and we struggled sometimes. We started getting into some of the detail, but realized that, well, when you implement this, you're going to work out some of the details, and that's really going to be up to whoever's going to do it. And the university is going to need to find someone who can provide the management leadership of the airport that we really need. Someone who not only has authority to hire people and stuff like that, which they can probably do within the university structure, but also is in charge of marketing, which there's hardly any marketing going on for our airport right now. Call on air service companies and do all those things you'd expect an airport manager to do. And so that was the most important thing. And we've learned just within the last week that the chancellors decided that the best way to approach that is to see if we can procure those services through a private airport management firm. There are really two ideas: hire internally or go out for a firm. And the recommendation of the task force was to try a management firm first, and so the universities decided to do that, and so they'll be proceeding only as the university can do these things, and it'll take longer, I'm sure, than any of us would like, but that effort has started. The second most important thing was air service. We need to really keep contacting different airlines, trying to make the argument that we're prepared to support additional air service, one of the things the university has done is they have now captured information about university travel. When we started this, they couldn't even tell you how much, who, where, how it was funded. They knew nothing about university employee travel other than they assumed there was a lot of it. And what they found out was about 60% of university travel is through Willard. And so now when they go to American Airlines, they can say, you know, we can't mandate our employees to fly through Willard yet. We'd like to think maybe they could do that sometime. But we do know that 60% of them do that by choice. And so our effort really is we just need to do a better job of marketing the airport, convincing people that it's to their advantage to fly through Willard. And we know that with the consultant, chancellor, associate chancellor, people in the president's office have visited corporate offices of United, American, several different airlines. They do that on a pretty regular basis over the last year. I'd say probably at least on a quarterly basis. They're doing that kind of work. They're doing it out of the chancellor's office. That's not where it belongs. Probably it should be the airport manager should be doing that, but they've stepped in because they don't have anybody to do that. And you can see that as of this time, they have not been successful in getting additional flights, but we're hopeful that we'll be able to do that. Now, there are some recommendations in here about building a community support group, and one of the things the consultant said is every community they have a policy in terms of what kind of incentives they're willing to offer an airline for adding service. And so their recommendation is that we create a guarantee fund of $1 million, that be publicly and privately supported. $2 million is not uncommon around the country. You may remember a story around the holidays where the state of Illinois put money into an effort by the Quad Cities. They have a direct flight to Washington, D.C. They were offering an incentive of $6 million. Like other types of economic development, you know, that gets you in the game. That doesn't get you the air service, but they don't take you seriously unless you're willing to make some type of a guarantee.
Is that a one-time thing, or is that?
It's really a guarantee. And so, and I asked the consultant, well, do people pay on this guarantee? Our experience with a guarantee with Delta wasn't that great. And they said, well, you have to make sure that you have a good chance of success. And yes, the guarantees are frequently drawn upon, particularly during the first 3 months, because it takes a certain amount of time for people to get in the habit of using a new flight. So the first 6 months, more likely, you know, if you haven't made it self-sustaining at the end of 6 months, well, you know, you're probably not going to be able to do it, and you may exhaust the entire guarantee before the service ends and they go someplace else. So that you want to be careful about picking a flight that you think will be successful, and you need to do a lot of marketing up front so that day one, when they start the service, you know, they have people getting on the plane. So yeah, so. But it's a one-time thing, usually for a 1-year period, and there's an accounting process they go through, and at the end of a quarter, you know, they've lost money, you know, you contribute to help cover the loss for them. Flight Store was maybe the third most important. People may not realize that one of the reasons we actually have better air service than most regional markets is that Flight Star does maintenance on the airplanes that fly in here, and so there are 4 airplanes overnight in Champaign every night, and Flight Star maintains them, and so we have it accounts for kind of an unusual flight schedule. We have a lot of flights coming in late, a lot of flights leaving early. That's because they're here to get maintained overnight, and then they take off. Well, the airline industry for regional market is switching planes to a larger plane, from a 50-seat to a 70-seat plane. Flight Star hangar, maintenance hangar, is not big enough to handle a 70-seat plane unless the tail's sticking out the door. So in order to accommodate the larger planes, Flight Star has to increase the size of their facility, which means that they need to negotiate with the university for a larger footprint. They have to be able to build that that facility in time for the larger planes to start arriving. Flightstar hasn't done that yet, so for a whole variety of reasons, but that's a real high priority. If we expect to have these additional flights that we have now because of the maintenance of planes, if they go to the 70-seaters and Flightstar can't handle it, they're going to go someplace else to for maintenance purposes, and we'll probably lose those flights. And the university and Flightstar are working on it. It's not a surprise to anybody. I mean, it's something they've been working on for some time, but they haven't pulled the trigger on that yet. Marketing would be the fourth area that I'd identify as maybe the fourth highest priority. And again, that goes back to the whole, you take a look at our market, and we have a lot to offer here just in terms of convenience. You're not driving for 2 hours or 3 hours or 45 minutes to the airport. You have short lines, easy to get through, security, close to home when you get back, all of those things that should make marketing our community easier. We're changing from CMI to Fly Champaign-Urbana. It's kind of the new logo, and then see you in Fort Myers or see you in, so you can use the letters for marketing purposes. And my understanding is that the university is going to proceed with at least a short-term marketing effort until we get some of these other things in place when they can put a full program into place. That leads us to the last item, which is governance and funding, because the university puts $400,000 a year into the airport. Maybe the week before we met with the chancellor, they got a little letter from the new governor, an executive order saying, you can only do essential spending. Well, what does that mean? I don't know. Somebody has maybe a operational definition of that. I'm not sure it was real clear at that point. But the reality is, the university has limited ability to go beyond the $400,000 they're putting in there now. They seem to be willing to continue that for a period of time, which is really important. And this gets to the fact that, then if this is a community facility, it serves the community, then the community probably ought to help with the funding of this. And our goal, of course, would be to have it be self-sufficient. But you can't go from the 50-year history we have and where we are now to being self-funded overnight. That's just not possible to do. And so figure, that's probably a 10-year effort to do that if you're really on top of it. And so really, can the local governments step in and provide some support in the long term? And if they do that, then they're going to want to have a say in terms of how the money is used. And that leads to the idea of some type of an advisory board in the short term. And so that was the recommendation, the governance recommendation, short term. Let's not worry about who owns the airport and a lot of these other complicating factors, but we can put an advisory board in place through intergovernmental agreement and maybe get some funding from the local governments to jumpstart some of these initiatives and hopefully start working towards self-sufficiency. Long term, then, what's the best approach? And the task force recommended going to an airport authority. It's the most common approach in Illinois. We don't really have it's not really connected to a city like Chicago. And so I'm not a big one for all these extra governments we have in Illinois. It offends me to even think that we're recommending this, but it's probably the best idea right now. But unfortunately in Illinois, all the special districts of every different shape and size only have one option for funding, and that's property tax. And the thought of adding another property tax to the property tax burden already in Illinois just didn't sit well with anybody on the task force. And so I think our options are two. One, long term, it'd be great to have an airport authority, but only if we can get the statute changed to recognize the uniqueness of this area, that the university needs to be a part of the task force, and there needs to be other options for funding other than just property tax, or to try to accomplish as much of that as we can through intergovernmental agreement. And we can get much of it that way, but it's not quite the same. So anyway, hope I didn't take too long, but that's a quick summary of 12 months worth of effort. And if I said anything wrong, Karl can correct me.
Karl?
Well, good evening. It's kind of interesting for me. Last night I spoke to a class of University of Illinois urban planning students, and tomorrow night I'll be speaking to the University of Illinois Student Senate. So I kind of have a chronological sandwich with the U of I students, the young kids being the bread, and you guys are the meat. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's fun for me. We have a past board member with Louise, a current board member with Don Utman, and my retired predecessor, Bill Volk. So I'll be on my best behavior. I don't really have as much to say as Steve does, but I'm mostly here to answer questions and have a conversation. So just to get that started, I'll kind of throw some topics out and touch on a couple of things, but I wouldn't say I actually have a program or presentation for you. Every year we launch our new service in August. We time that to start with the fall semester of the University of Illinois. And just to give you a sneak peek of some of the things that we're looking at doing this year, there's a pink route in Southwest Champaign, and we're looking at changing and expanding that route so that it directly serves Country Fair and has a better connectivity to some of the other routes, because Country Fair is still one of our main transfer areas within the community, and so it doesn't go to Country Fair now on a regular basis, but by going there, then people who live in the Southwest Champaign area will have enhanced connectivity to the rest of the system. We also have gotten on a regular basis a request to improve or enhance our service to the newer location of the Champaign-Urbana Public Health District on Neal Street, and we are trying to fine-tune a manner in which to do that to give them better service, but in such a way that it doesn't degrade the service of the route that goes by that facility and destroy some of the connections that route has with the rest of the system. And then in addition to that, we're looking at some changes to our green and gray routes. They're connected to one another right now, and we're looking at breaking them apart so that we can improve the schedule adherence for those routes. The green in particular is a route that we can struggle with to keep on time because it has such heavy ridership, such great usage that, and it goes through the core of campus, that it is a difficult route to keep on schedule because we operate our buses in the same environment that everybody else operates in, and so we are impacted by that. Something else the board will be confronted with over the next year, and we've had a preliminary conversation about it, is the potential of whether or not we'll change the way that we treat our service on holidays. I wouldn't say that the board has come to any resolution yet, but staff and the board are thinking about that and weighing the pros and cons of that. So that'll be a continuing conversation that we have. Some projects that we have happening, we were participating in the Willard Task Force, and I will be continuing with the new Steve's new team that he volunteered for coming up in the next year. So that'll be ongoing. We recently completed a study on an expansion to Illinois Terminal. Illinois Terminal is our main transfer facility, and we really view Illinois Terminal as a premier location in downtown Champaign and a trigger to a lot of the economic recovery and development turnaround in downtown Champaign. And in fact, I know some of the developers who have done some of the follow-up development in Champaign also point to Illinois Terminal as the trigger for that. So we want to keep Illinois Terminal in as as high an echelon of service that we possibly can. And we are at a point in time where we have maximized the space that we have available to us with our transportation services. We have maximized the space that we have that we lease out to tenants. And and that's great. That's revenue from the tenants. That's good utilization for transportation. But there's no room for growth. And so we completed a study so that we could take a look at just some different potentials on how, when we get to the point that we're going to do this, how could this move forward? And so we'll be, when we get the final documents from the architects for that study, then we'll post that on our website and have that readily and easily available to the public so that they can take a look at it. It's all very conceptual. Nothing at all is set in stone. There's just some ideas on how we could move that expansion forward. But it is something that we'll have to take a very serious look at in the next couple of years. Likewise, we also have an agreement, an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Urbana. We created a study area in downtown Urbana, and so this is a development agreement that we have to share our planning and development resources to look at developing a location that would house an off-street transfer facility for MTD, and that would also accommodate other governmental entities and their programming needs, like the Urbana Park District, the Urbana School District, the library, and potentially even the city. So those are all in the mix. We're very early in the process of looking at this study area to determine where might be the best location for that, who are the partners that would be willing to come to the table to look at that development, and we'll see where we go with that. You probably have heard about a Tiger grant that we received. It's a $15 million grant that MTD applied for in coordination with the City of Champaign, the City of Urbana, and the University of Illinois. Tiger stands for Transportation Improvement Generating Economic Recovery. Very clever. So it's a funding program that the federal government has to act as a stimulus to the economy, and at the same time to improve the country's infrastructure. And so what we applied for with the cities and the university was to replace and or repair a network of major corridors within primarily the campus area. So a couple of years ago, Champaign did Green Street between Wright and 4th, and they totally tore out the old street all the way down to the base and rebuilt it. And as a part of this Tiger Grant program, we'll do Green Street from 4th to Neal, and then we'll do the remainder of Green Street from Wright all the way east to Race Street in Urbana. And then north-south, the corridor that's a part of the project is Wright Street, and then a little tail of Armory on the very south end of Wright, and White Street on the north end of Wright Street. And so all of those streets will be enhanced and improved, and will develop new bus stop transit facilities, but they'll also accommodate pedestrian and bicycle activity in a more safe and functional manner. So the City of Champaign is acting as the entity of contract, and they have contracted with Clark Dietz to do the engineering and design work for this project, and that has that is underway, and it's a big project. It's a $30 million project overall, with $15 million made up of federal funds, and the actually $34 million, and so the remaining $19 million is made up by local funds between the two cities, MTD, and the university. So it's a great partnership between all four entities, and it will really be a great enhancement for the core part of our community when we're done. But I can tell you it will be very painful getting to the end, because that's a lot of construction to do, and the federal timeline is very strict about it having to be done in a very short period of time. So we're going to be busy, and you're going to want to stay away from that area for a while. Probably most of you have heard of our dash passes, but in case any of you haven't, I just wanted to remind you that we have a dash pass. It's a free ID that allows you to ride our fixed route bus system for free, and it also allows individuals with disabilities to ride our fixed route buses for free as well. And we've got an annual pass that is available for $72 for people who are not over 65 or that don't have a disability. And 2 years ago, we introduced a new monthly pass for $15 that has been very popular as well. I was looking at our ridership the other day, and in 1975, we had about 1 million riders. And in the last fiscal year, we exceeded 13 million riders. So there has been just a real incredible growth with the system. We have 102 buses now, and 55% of those buses are diesel-electric hybrid buses. Next month, we're going to start on a construction project at our maintenance facility and tear down our old storage and maintenance facility, and then build on to our remaining one, so that we have one maintenance building that can accommodate the storage and parking of all our vehicles. That'll be a really nice enhancement for our maintenance department. And then just to touch on a couple of challenges that we have, I just found out tonight that a part of the governor's budget that will be unveiled tomorrow is apparently a 35% cut in the state's funding of public transportation. And that is, we were expecting a potentially up to 20%. And it sounds like he is going a bit further than that, and that will have an impact on us.
Don't take public transportation.
What's that?
People don't take public transportation.
Well, he apparently doesn't. So you know, that's he hasn't given his speech yet, so maybe it'll change between the word that I got tonight and his unveiling tomorrow. But if that's the case, then we have some work ahead of us, and that I certainly would put that in the challenges column. In addition to that, an ongoing challenge that we have is employment. We have had a difficult time bringing new drivers and mechanics on board over the last couple of years, and our employment pool has shrunken, and it's creating some daily challenges for us to complete the services that we've committed to you to complete. And so we're always, whenever I get out, I'm always talking about, if you know somebody who's looking for a part-time job or a full-time job, have them give us a call, because we can probably use them. And with that, I'll just, I think Steve is too, open for questions. Do you want to call on people?
Sure.
I have
Tricia?
a sort of a small question, but it I think reflects a lot of the change in bus service. The bus stops with the time, with the digital information, so you can see exactly how long it is until the next bus is there, seems like just a wonderful thing for customers.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those do you have?
We have We have about 25 out on the street right now, and with this Tiger grant, these corridors that are a part of the Tiger grant will receive that level. Most of the stops, or at least many of the stops on those corridors will receive that level of bus stop amenity. So when that's completed, that number will significantly increase. But right now we hover right around 25.
Do you know if a lot of your customers use, the internet or whatever to find out when their bus is coming and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I used to keep track of all of that when we first launched the system, and we'd watch month to month the amount of usage for all the different manners in which people can get the real-time information, and I stopped doing that because the growth was so explosive, and it just became almost impossible to track anymore because it just exceeded our ability to monitor it on a regular basis. So yes, it gets used a lot. We hear about it when the system has a hiccup or we have to do maintenance on it and bring the system down. Then boy, we hear about it from customers, and that's great. I think it takes away a lot of the nervousness that some people might have with using a bus system. Because they know exactly when that bus is going to be there, and just so you know, it's not just at the stops that have these kiosks with the digital signs. People can get that information on a computer or their phone, and so no matter where they are, and relative to any stop within the system, they can get that information, and it's a very, very powerful tool for the rider to have.
I'm curious about the number, if you have numbers as to how many of the riders are students and how many of them are townspeople, or breaking it down even further from the public schools to the university?
Well, I can tell you that of our total ridership, about 70% of it is university-oriented. That includes students, faculty, and staff. But they clearly are, the university is that's the engine that drives the community, and it's the engine that drives MTD also.
Deb?
I guess it's kind of a small question, but you led up to it with talking about the green bus, in that corridor that's heavily traveled, and I think about going through there. Now, I think about two things. One is that Tiger grant that's changing that route, and when I think of what happened with Lincoln Avenue, I mean, you don't have a rail like a Metro does or something like that, but does the improving the street and everything actually improve the bus flow of being able to keep moving?
Well, many of these corridors that are part of this Tiger project will have bus-only lanes or bus and bicycle shared lanes, and so when we have a dedicated lane that we can use, then that absolutely will help our flow and ability to move through some of those areas. Now, we don't have that on all of those streets, but that will be a part of the enhancements overall for the network.
Beth?
I'm just curious, what percentage of your budget comes from the state right now?
Generally, for our operating budget, 65% of that is paid for by the state operating assistance.
It's a big thing.
Yeah.
Karl, I noticed actually neither one of you mentioned the village of Savoy, and I've recently moved there. I remember that Bill used to have to carry a sidearm and a bodyguard to go out there, but I hope maybe things are a little bit better now. Is there development in view either for local service in Savoy or for additional service to the airport?
We are operating a route to the airport right now, and we have for several years called.
Additional.
Well, we're trying to maintain the route that we have right now because It's called the Airbus, and that route was primarily funded by the University of Illinois and their Institute for Aviation. And as you probably know, the University of Illinois no longer has an Institute of
that's
Aviation.
quite right,
They turned that over to Parkland. And so circumstances changed, and the Airbus, the funding for the Airbus then wasn't available when that transfer occurred. So we negotiated a one-year trial with the university to continue the Airbus, but we really tweaked it quite a bit and really made it a route that serves the Illini Union Hotel. And so it essentially is a shuttle from the airport to that hotel. Now it still goes through campus and still serves Illinois Terminal, but its primary goal for the university to participate in the funding of that was as an airport shuttle for the hotel. So this is the trial year. We're sharing all the ridership records with the university, and we are in the middle of a conversation right now talking about our next contract with the university, and that's an aspect of it.
That is a recommendation of the Airport Task Force as well, which was to continue the bus service and to improve the taxi service, improve ground transportation between the community and the airport.
Don?
First, I'd like to thank the League for having both of these speakers here. I think it's very important for our community to think of transportation as a system and not as streets or only buses or only air or rail.
Amen.
And your two speakers here, I think, symbolize the fact that transportation for our community is really a system involving pedestrians, bicycles, automobiles, buses, trains, airplanes, and they all need to work together for our community to be best served. Secondly, I'd like to ask both speakers about the window that you look at. Steve, for example, were you looking at maybe the next 20 years for the airport, or a longer time or a short time? It's important because we have such things as a third Chicago airport or the possibility of high-speed rail coming in longer term that could affect some of this. So was your work really focused on maybe the next 20 years, and we want to do the best we can in the next 20 years and then reassess? And then on the MPD side, to what extent do you look long-term at the needs of our system for what you provide?
Well, I think the Airport Task Force, we got a much shorter horizon because I think we're looking, realistically, what can we do in 5 years and maybe 10 years, We'd like to get all those things done in 5 years, but it may be 10 years. Particularly if we really work towards self-sufficiency for the airport, that's a longer-term goal. But there's so much change in the air industry right now to try to predicting what's going to happen next year is a little bit of a challenge. So a 5-year frame, I think, is reasonable for the recommendations that we came up with. And anytime you do a strategic plan, you need to revisit it probably every 2 years, 2 or 3 years anyway, and update it because things change that quick anymore.
Karl, you want?
My answer will be fairly similar. We've got a couple of different levels at which we look forward. Of course, we have a one-year horizon that we always are looking at. For instance, I started off talking about the changes that we're looking at instituting in the fall, and so we always have the next fall to be looking forward to. But then we also have roughly a 5-year horizon that we look at for projects and capital improvement projects and capital replacement projects. And then we also just recently completed our strategic plan, and that's got a little bit of a longer horizon. However, our horizon is shifting on us potentially significantly tomorrow. So that causes us to have to look at things differently and be a little more flexible and fluid with what we're looking at doing.
Jan, I think that's you behind.
Comment when you were still making your presentation or your non-presentation. you commented about having difficulty attracting bus drivers, other personnel, and right now with Champaign, big topic is Central, where it's going to be located, and their involvement with Parkland. Do you do anything with Parkland? One of the candidates, I won't say names, but running for the school board was my next door neighbor when I lived in Champaign, but now I'm a Savoyite too. But one of his emphasis is on non-college student, leaving high school, going to college, and some emphasis on training the needs in the community for various kinds. Are you working with Parkland at all on any of that?
Yes, actually, Parkland has a really excellent diesel mechanics school and an associate's degree that they have for that. And we almost always have at least one intern from that program in our maintenance department, and frequently we have more than that. And that has been of late. That has been where we have hired our new mechanics from. So yeah, it's a great program, and we've got a very strong relationship with the faculty and staff there, and have many of their students who have become our employees.
And I don't know what's happening right now, but I was on the county board up through 2012, and it was a few years before that we met with some of the labor groups, and at that time, anyhow, the people that were the schools that were taking advantage of the Parkland when they had fairs and so forth were the ones in the outlying area, and I was ashamed that Champaign, and I think Urbana too, did not really take advantage of that, or in promoting within the high school. Now maybe it's getting better, and I don't know if you have any feel for that or not.
Are you talking about that program, or you're talking about bus usage?
Well, like they would have a fair to try and attract maybe students.
A job
to
fair?
their program.
Vocational.
And Champaign would not send, anybody from their few. It was St. Joe and maybe Rantoul and some of the outlying areas that were getting more students involved with that. And that's been at least maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So things could have changed, but I'm wondering if you're working maybe with the high schools as well.
Well, I don't know that we're doing a lot directly with the high schools, though we do participate in, for instance, Champaign Unit 4's student summer employment program, and we have participated in that for several years and plan to continue to, and so we have employed some of the high school students over the summer, and I believe on occasion there have been some of those students who have continued past the end of the summer in part-time positions. The job fair that you mentioned that Parkland hosts, we go to that and we recruit there. So at that level, we are involved with it. We do all the student transportation for the high schools and middle schools in Champaign and Urbana. So we have a pretty good relationship with those individual schools. But I can't say that we've really done a lot directly with them. One little wrinkle in our ability to do that is that right now, in order to get a CDL, we require a person to be 21 or over. So a high school, even a high school graduate, can't be a driver, and we need all of our mechanics and service workers to have CDLs also, because they have to move the vehicle around on the property, in and out of bays and through the bus wash and that kind of thing. So there's a gap there, an age gap between when somebody graduates from high school and then where they would be eligible to be hired in a CDL carrying position.
Antia?
Would you like to comment somewhat on the relationship that MPD's continuing to have with the high schools and transportation in view of the move of Central High School to somewhere, and what that's going to involve for MPD? Because I watch the traffic at Central High School, I watch the traffic at Edison, and everybody who participates in that as individual drivers and as bus drivers work very hard to keep it from being a total zoo. But what are we in for with a new Central High School somewhere in terms of costs, logistics?
Okay. I'll try to respond. I can't give very many specifics. It's certainly not possible at this point for me to give cost estimates on different locations. There are too many variables. But I'll say this, that we have a very good relationship with Unit 4, and I know that the staff and the school board are not being flippant about this. They are really deliberating and taking this very seriously and want to do what's best for their students. And so whether that means the school will end up on Interstate Drive, or whether it means it will be at Dodds Park or somewhere altogether different, who knows at this stage. I've been invited to the Park District's meeting on February 25th to have the public forum to discuss Dodds Park as a possible alternative to the site up north. And it will be very interesting and probably entertaining to be at that meeting, and I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Spoken like a real diplomat. I'm going to use the prerogative of a chair here for just a minute, because I don't want us to not deal with this. Do either of you have insights that you could share regarding railroad transportation, high-speed facilities? Are we anywhere with this discussion?
Well, from my perspective, I would say that this we talk about a 10-year horizon with a strategic plan or something. No, this is probably going to be a 20, 25, 30-year horizon for something like this. I mean, there are a lot of people interested in it and working on it and talking to legislators about it and talking to potential developers that could be associated with high-speed rail. We've been involved with many of those conversations. We would be very supportive of a high-speed rail line to Chicago, but also a national network of high-speed rail. I think it makes a lot of sense. But there, as a country and certainly as a state and a region, we have a lot of work to do before we can make that happen. But there are a lot of people working on it. So who knows?
I just wondered why Illinois is funding a high-speed rail line to the University of Iowa, but not to the University of Illinois. And I'm an Iowa grad, but I just thought that was kind of funny that and University of Iowa has a lot of Illinois students there, which is great for them, I guess, but it just seemed kind of curious that they're not more supportive of the public university.
Here. Tricia?
With all the data that you required in the airport study about where people come from and where they're going, is there, and so you take that and you talk to the airlines about what a new route would be. Where are people flying? When they fly from Willard, where are they going to end up at?
East or west?
Yeah.
East or west?
Everybody's going east or west.
Yeah, if you look at, now, I found this hard to believe, but one of the statistics was that every day there are 70 people going from Champaign-Urbana to Washington, D.C. and back. And, you know, that's like a whole airplane worth. You know, Washington, D.C., New York on the East Coast, San Francisco, Los Angeles on the West Coast would be the top. Denver would fall in there, but and the interest that the community has expressed in different ways is really toward, we need a new flight, you know, better access to the East Coast, better access to the West Coast. Now, I think the consultant in looking at that thought that, you know, we're a little bit weaker going east. If you fly down to Dallas, for example, you have great access to just about every major airport in the West, but it's harder to get east from here. You go through Chicago, but there are a lot of people who would like to avoid going through Chicago if they could. And so when they looked at options, you know, they're focusing primarily on American Airlines because, you know, that two airlines don't fly to regional markets, and United, you know, doesn't fly to Champaign, and so they're probably, even though they still call on United, it's not as likely for them to pick up the flight as for American to pick it up. And with the merger with U.S. Air, Charlotte is a major hub that has great access to many places on the East Coast, and there's probably capacity there. Everybody would like to go to Washington, have a flight to Washington, D.C., but in that merger, the combined airlines lost like 40 gates at Washington, D.C., so they don't have gates to offer for flights anymore, and you know, those gates have been auctioned off, and the people that have taken those are basically flying from other big cities, and they're not flying from regional markets to Washington, D.C. They've added flights from Chicago and, you know, other major cities to Washington, D.C. So our best option, they think, is probably East Coast to Charlotte as a hub, and hopefully other places from there.
Steve, have you data on the question of delays at Willard that, of course, result in misconnections and so forth in the hub cities? Was that part of your data?
We looked at delays because, you know, one of the things we wanted to do is, well, let's try to look at, you know, the things, what are we hearing in the community, and, you know, kind of what are the typical complaints, and let's look at those specifically. Complaints, cancellations, you know, those were both complaints. A lot of people have experienced that. You know, they have a connecting flight in Chicago, and late at night, and the last flight out gets canceled for some reason, and, you know, the consultant's response was, well, you know, they do everything they can to get those flights down here, typically because they have to be maintained. Now, they may, you know, there are other factors that may enter in. They may not have pilots to fly them, you know, but out of O'Hare, I mean, O'Hare has one of the worst on-flight records of any airport in the country. And so since, you know, 6 out of our 7 flights go to Chicago, we're going to bear the brunt of that as well. Most of that's weather related as well. Our flight, our cancellation rate to Dallas-Fort Worth is almost negligible. But if you look at the regional market going into O'Hare, our cancellation rate is a little bit less than most of the other regional airports.
Really?
But it's, I don't know, Karl, you remember, it's like, I mean, it's under 6%. So it's, you know, it's not a huge number, and it's a number that we don't have a lot of control over. And if the airlines are pressured because of weather or for whatever reason, if they're going to cancel a flight, they're going to cancel a regional air flight as opposed to a flight to Washington, D.C. or New York City.
Sure.
So the regional markets, you know, do suffer, and understandably so. They're going to try to fly as, you know, hit the major markets, give that top priority.
But that cancellation or delay problem is almost never caused by something that happens in Champaign. It's almost always caused at O'Hare, and yet Willard kind of gets saddled with the reputation of having poor on-time performance, but it really is out of their control. And like I was.
It does happen in Dallas too.
On occasion, sure. I mean, it happens everywhere on occasion.
Every airport has those problems at a certain level, and this winter, maybe more so.
Yeah. Steve?
Did your task force look at regional cooperation and/or competition issues?
Well, we know where our passengers are, where the people in our market area are flying out of, and so the consultant is very knowledgeable about all these other airports and the flights, and so he has knowledge of the competition, and they work for a lot of regional airports across the country, and so there's comparables that way. From that standpoint, I mean, it's something that's in the consultant's mind as he's looking at this and analyzing it and making recommendations. One of the things the task force did ask was, well, is there any way that, do we have too many airports, in East Central Illinois, and is there any way that, you could, tie a couple of them together that would make both of them stronger? And he said, no. And he said there's really no interest in doing it, and he couldn't.
Out of business.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the airlines have that capability. If they want to do that, they just stop flying to an airport. And we asked Greg Principato, who's headquartered in Washington, because there's been a discussion that there's some secret panel, that's the FAA has looking at their financial support for airports and drawing the line somewhere and saying, okay, we're no longer going to provide any federal funding for airports for this group of airports. And it's important. It's important at Willard because they get $1 million a year in federal support that they use for capital projects. And if they didn't have that, well, that would really be harmful. But we're not on that. We haven't been on that list. They didn't think we would be on that list. Partly because the number of employments we have is pretty good compared to many others, and we have an FAA staffed tower, and they use that for training air traffic controllers in the system. And so when when their air traffic control facility had problems, our facility was picking up a lot of that traffic that Chicago could no longer handle. So the fact that we have an FAA staffed tower here puts us in a little higher category in the federal system.
How important is the Institute of Aviation to that status?
I'm not aware that that's a big issue. Employments is important, but the number of takeoffs and landings, I've heard that was important to the status of the airport, but more recently they said that really, the way that it's calculated, that doesn't make much difference. So I'm not sure that I have a good answer on that one.
Just curious, what do the other airports have if they don't have FAA people staffing there? I mean, these people have training, don't they?
What was the question?
What do the other airports have that don't have FAA, aren't part of the FAA system in the air control?
Well, most of the flights going in there are controlled someplace else, I assume, except, right in the immediate vicinity of the airport.
Or they have automated systems that the computers talk to each other, but there's not a person there.
Some of them have contractors too, independent contractors that these are FAA employees here at Willard, and the other places may be contractors.
Just for Steve, can you just repeat the statistic about how many people actually use the Bloomington Airport? Because that's always sort of the red herring. You always hear people say, "Oh, everybody's going to Bloomington because of the free parking."
Oh, you mean the percentages?
Yeah, but what did you say?
Yeah, so about a third, 33% of the people in our market area fly out of Willard. About a third of the tickets, not people, but let's say a third of the tickets that are sold in our market area fly out of Willard. And I'm told that, now that the university has centralized that, about 60% of the university travels out of Willard. And the airport that draws most of the tickets from our market area is Indianapolis. About 37% go to Indianapolis. And that's because, it's not because they have free parking over there, because they don't, obviously, but they have 34 nonstop destinations out of Indianapolis. And so people travel for, we think, the primary influences in terms of where people fly out of are cost. If there's a large cost difference, people will go where there's a low-cost carrier. And nonstop flights. People prefer nonstop flights, and so they'll travel obviously 2 hours to Indianapolis if they can get a nonstop flight to Florida as opposed to going to Dallas and something like that. And if you take a look, O'Hare and Midway together are about 25% more to O'Hare than Midway. I think O'Hare maybe was about twice the percentage as Midway, but if you add those two together, it's about a quarter. And then it was maybe 6 or 8% to Bloomington.
6%.
6% to Bloomington.
And what's the area that we're talking about here?
Oh, let's say it's maybe about a 60-mile circumference. So, and you get 60 miles east of us. If you get over to Danville or Covington, it's probably almost as close to go to Indianapolis as it is to Willard at that point. So as you go out, there's more of a bleed off into other airports. The same way, if you go 60 miles north, it's a lot easier to get to Midway than it is from Champaign-Urbana, probably too.
Any other questions? Really some good questions tonight, so thank you. And let's give our guests a round of appreciation. Before we break up, though, Steve, you mentioned that the full report, is that online somewhere?
Yes. You can go to the University of Illinois website, and on the far right top is a little bar that says Task Force, and all the notes from all of the meetings and all of the consultant reports as well as the final plan is on that. Or I'm sure you could contact the Chancellor's office, they'd send it to you. I have a copy of it, and Karl has a copy of it. We'd be happy to.
And I think that website is flycmi.com.
Okay.
Right?
I don't know, I just Googled Willard Airport.
Yeah, or you could do that. Thank you all for coming on what's not a terribly warm night here in central Illinois. Just a reminder that this program will be taped and we'll share it on Thursday at noon at Clark. We're not? Oh, we're not? Oh, okay. It will be on public television, though, right? Okay. Next month, we will have the first of 2 of our Observer Corps meetings, and that one will be at noon at Clark Lindsay. I will get a schedule from Betty Siegel about which entities will be reporting in March and which ones will report in April. The March meeting is a noon meeting. The April meeting is an evening meeting. So we hope you can be with us for that. And unless there's some other business, I think we are adjourned.